Shout out to G-Man Boxing.
From Josh Taylor's victory this weekend, where he became the undisputed 140-pound champion in just his 18th professional fight. Josh Taylor, for me, really is, and you know, people would say there's guys like Billy Joe, Tyson. For me, Josh Taylor is, without question, the best fighter in the UK, and he's the best fighter in the UK by an absolute country mile. The achievements Josh Taylor has done in a relatively short space of time. I mean, bear in mind, Josh Taylor has only had 18 professional fights. Whilst Josh Taylor was a very good amateur, and he was a very good amateur, he didn't turn pro with the kind of hype that will say, you know, a perfect example, Joshua Buatsi. You know, Joshua Buatsi is a good fighter, don't get me wrong, but I remember in Rio, people were talking about him, you know, being the best out of the Team GB squad, and that he's the one you got to watch. Now, Joshua Buatsi is a very good fighter, and at British level, with the exception of maybe Callum Johnson, you would say he's the best there. But Joshua Buatsi, at this, like, he's at least another year, maybe a little bit longer away from a world title shot. Josh Taylor, from very early on, you could see there was talent there. I remember now I'd heard of Josh Taylor prior to this fight, but I hadn't actually seen him. The first time I'd seen Josh Taylor was when he fought Dave Ryan for the Commonwealth title on Channel 5. That was back in 2016. I think it was towards the end of 2016. And Dave Ryan I'd seen fight before. I'd seen him fight in a few Sky cards. He was heavy. He was durable. He wasn't the best fighter in the world. He was probably kind of English level, but he was durable. You know, he took guys around. I think the only time he was stopped prior was due to an injury, and it was a freak injury as well. So I knew Dave Ryan was tough and durable. So I said, right, I'll get a good look at Josh Taylor in this fight. And even back then, I was extremely impressed with Josh Taylor. I looked at that fight and I thought, oh, this guy right here is going to be a massive problem. You know, even back, and he was with Shane McGuigan at the time. He was still with Barry and Shane. I was like, this guy's going to be a problem. And at the time, he was getting compared to O'Hara Davis. And they were talking about the two of them, you know, potentially having a fight some stage. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I've no shame admitting it, at the time, I bought into the hype with O'Hara Davis. I did. Although he looked crude, you just thought he had that air of confidence about him. You could see the punching power. So I kind of thought that him against Davis would be a great fight, it'd be a competitive fight. And I was kind of thinking, who would I go for? I see Josh Taylor on the undercard of Frampton Santa Cruz 2 against the Mexican guy. I can't remember the guy's name. But it went 8 rounds, and that was Josh Taylor's first time going the distance. Went 8 rounds. Now, he won every round, but that guy was awkward. And he made Josh Taylor kind of look a bit clumsy at times in there. I remember it well. And I remember the consensus after that fight was O'Hara Davis wins this fight comfortably. And then O'Hara Davis goes and knocks out Derry Matthews. We end up getting Josh Taylor versus O'Hara Davis in Scotland in July 2017. And that fight right there, it showed hype versus talent. This is hype, that's talent. Josh Taylor was a country mile ahead of O'Hara Davis. He goes on and fights Miguel Vasquez. Now bear in mind, Miguel Vasquez was stopped by Josh Taylor, and he still looked a very good fighter in there with Josh Taylor, but Josh Taylor was a level above him. Miguel Vasquez is getting robbed against guys like O'Hara Davis and against guys like Lewis Ritson today. And that was a couple of years ago. That was 2017. Right? So it shows that Vasquez was still formidable and Josh Taylor was a level above. Going in against Victor Postal, and this was an eliminator. I think that was a WBC eliminator, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was mandatory for the WBC at one point before the World Boxing Super Series. Again, that was a competitive fight, don't get me wrong. It was close. But this was a Victor Postal whose only career loss was at the hands of Terence Crawford. It was, yes, he was comprehensively outboxed by Terence Crawford. It was still Terence Crawford. At the time, that was genuinely, most people would have had Crawford number 1 pound for pound. So your only loss was to a pound for pound guy. And Josh Taylor, who at the time, you know, Miguel Vasquez was his best win, was kind of fringe world level. You were dealing with a world level operator, Victor Postal. And whilst it was a close fight, Josh Taylor won the fight, dropped Postal in the 10th round. And you see Josh Taylor, you see the talent that was there. Alright? And that was when, it was after that fight he went into the World Series of Boxing. And I do believe, now you can if I'm wrong about this, feel free to let me know. But as far as I'm aware, Josh Taylor is the only guy who's won the World Series of Boxing who has fought all undefeated opponents. Right? Callum Smith fought Skoglund in that kickboxer. They're both undefeated. I think Skoglund was undefeated anyway. But George Grove certainly wasn't in the final. Usyk, although Breedis was undefeated and Gassiev was undefeated, Marco Huck certainly wasn't. Inoue, likewise. I forget who Inoue fought, actually, when I think about it now. Who did he fight? God almighty, I forget now. But anyway, Nonito Donaire certainly wasn't undefeated, in that competition. God almighty, I've forgotten now. I think Payal wasn't undefeated either. That was who he fought in the first round. But Josh Taylor, Ryan Martin was unbeaten at the time. Who did he fight? Baranchek was undefeated at the time when he fought Baranchek and won his world title. And then he obviously fought Regis Prograis. All undefeated. I mean, Josh Taylor has been taking O's, like Adrian Broner should be taking L's. Do you know that sort of way? Literally like fighters take L's, he takes O's. 3 undefeated fighters. Ryan Martin's not the greatest in the world, it has to be said, but still, took his O. Ivan Baranchek won his world title, unified then with Regis Prograis, who is still a very good fighter, who is still, in my opinion, top 3 at 140. You can add Jose Zepeda in there as well if you want, but I still think Regis Prograis would beat Jose Zepeda. I think he probably would even beat Jose Ramirez, to be honest with you. A rematch between him and Taylor, I still would probably be up in the air who I'd pick, because Prograis is a very good fighter. The resume speaks volume for Josh Taylor, speaks for itself. Alright, and what he's done, again, in a relatively short space of time, is just fantastic. The thing that irritates me the most, and it's a shame, and it really is a chronic shame, is how little coverage we give Josh Taylor over in the UK and Ireland. I mean, you talk to the average casual, because I do occasionally, and they'd be talking about, AJ Fury, or Billy Joe Saunders, and I'm like, well, Josh Taylor's who the hell's Josh Taylor? Are you talking about that guy who got stopped by Sky? The guy who was real... No, that's Josh... Do you not know who Josh Taylor is? I've never heard of him. And now he's undisputed champion. And this fight wasn't shown on a major platform in the UK. I mean, Channel 5, for the love of God. He was on the Channel 5 team for Frampton versus Heron. You would think at least Channel 5, terrestrial TV, would want to pick that up. But no go. That's not good. That's a disgrace. So you have an undisputed 140-pound champion. Alright, when's the last time the UK had an undisputed champion? Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis in 1999 was the last time the UK had an undisputed champion. Right? Josh Taylor is the second person at that division to do it. Terence Crawford being the other. Josh Taylor definitely easily in the top 10 pound for pound. Question is, how high up the top 10 pound for pound do you have him? I'll have to have a quick look at the pound for pound before I make that decision. I don't really do pound for pound too much, but easily top 10 pound for pound. And we don't hear much about him. People, and look, I like Josh Warrington, but you hear more about Josh Warrington coming off the loss to Mauricio Lara than you do of Josh Taylor winning an undisputed world title, being undisputed champion at that weight. It's absolutely crazy. People, I don't want to come across as a fanboy of Eddie Hearn, because believe you me, there's a lot of things he's done over the years that I don't agree with. I know what you can tell Eddie Hearn can be deceitful. But I do think as a promoter he is one of the best in the business, and I think that if Josh Taylor was with Eddie Hearn, oh boy, they would sell the crap out of Josh Taylor. Because when I looked at that fight against O'Hara Davis in Scotland, that arena was just singing Josh Taylor's name. That was on Channel 5, if memory serves me correctly. That was on Channel 5, actually. And they were actually talking about Ricky Burns as an opponent for Josh Taylor straight after. And I was just thinking, God, he has pulling power. In Scotland he's a star, that's brilliant. But Josh Taylor has pulling power. But it's just, for whatever reason, he's just not been given platforms. I think some of it may have to do with Josh Taylor, the way his views. And believe me, I agree with a lot of Josh Taylor's views. I think Josh Taylor is an absolute stand-up guy. And look, you know me, I always call it objective. I always call it down as I see it. If Josh Taylor does something in the future that I deem is not right, I'll be the first one to say, you're out of line there. Or if he does a performance and, etc., etc., I'll be the first to say, if he has a bad performance, I'll say it. But in terms of what he stands for, outside of boxing, you people know, I think Josh Taylor is absolute spot on. He's a real stand-up man. That's the word I use. I use man because that's what he is, you know, for believing what he believes and not being afraid to, you know, say it. So I think maybe that can go against him in certain ways. Remember when Tyson Fury beat Klitschko? You know, it's different. It is different, but a lot of the times people like guys. A lot of times the mainstream like guys who just say what they're told, more or less. And Josh Taylor isn't one of them guys. Fantastic fighter. 140-pound champion now. Question is, what's next for him? You know, people are saying. I see people saying they want to see him fight Jack Catterall at 140. I like Jack Catterall. No, he's a good fighter. He's a good European fighter, level fighter. But as a homecoming, maybe, you know, when you've cleaned out a division, with Josh Taylor, other than Jose Zepeda, if you want to use him, he's really beaten everyone kind of he needs to beat. And I know Jose Zepeda doesn't have anything, but he's top 5 at 140. You know, unless someone like, you know, Lomachenko wants to move up, which I don't think he will. Unless Teofimo Lopez moves up, which I don't know. There's no one really for Josh Taylor at 140. But I do like seeing undisputed champions defend their title at least once. I liked it when Usyk did it against Bellew. I would have liked to have seen Crawford do it. Although saying that, when Crawford was champion 140 pounds, Felix Diaz, a decent fighter, but nothing spectacular. Julius Ndongo, you know, who else do you have? Relic, who was the guy's name? Ricky Burns. Who else do you have? John Molina Jr. These guys pale in comparison to the guys we have now. So one fight at this weight, people are saying Jack Catterall. Be a good homecoming. Jack Catterall's promoted by Fish Eyes. Last time I checked, he was. I think he's with MTK as well. Yeah, in fact, I think he is. So they could do that fight in Scotland, hopefully with fans. Hopefully full attendance. Because a homecoming for Josh Taylor in Scotland, full of fans, undisputed champion at 140. I'd like the sound of that. I just hope they put that on. That'd probably be on BT Sports. I just hope they would give it the coverage it deserves, because Josh Taylor really does deserve a lot more coverage than he's getting. I mean, at the end of the day, AJ Fury, people talk about that being undisputed. Josh Taylor's done it. He's done it. He's done it before them. He's done it in 18 fights, 18 pro fights. I think he was Commonwealth champion in only, 6 fights? Something like that. It's crazy. I was more than 6 fights, but it wasn't long. Didn't take him long. Josh Taylor, excellent fighter. That's my thoughts on this. I want to know what your thoughts in the comment section below is. What do you think of Josh Taylor moving forward? Do you think that he maybe needs to look at going down the route of a different promoter? I don't know how long he's been. I don't know how long he's signed with Bob Arum, because I know he's with Bob Arum. But do you think he needs to look elsewhere for a promoter? Do you think that there's anything we can do to, or anything he can do, I should say, to, you know, get more coverage out there? And in terms of who he wants to fight next, let me know what you think down below. For now, lads and lassies, hope you enjoyed this video. Smash the like button if you did. Subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. Hashtag GMansRocks, all that good stuff. Lads and lassies, for now, I'll talk to you. Peace.